Alright guys, so what we're going to do now is we're going to take a look at class binding. So class binding has to do with adding or using certain classes depending on certain properties or values or certain aspects of our component. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the user's model or the interface, which we have in our models folder. Excuse me, and I'm going to add a property here called isActive, and that's going to be optional, and it's going to be a Boolean. So you can think of this as maybe a user that has been active within the last 30 days, or maybe a user that has activated their email, something like that. It doesn't really matter the actual situation. This isn't like a real application. But let's take that, and then let's go to our users component HTML, and I want to go to the li with the class of card. So basically each of these is an li with the class of card, and I want to do a class binding. So I'm going to go, let's see, I'm going to go to the very end of the li, put some brackets in, and just say class, and then the name of the class I want to use. In this case it's going to be bg-light, which is actually a bootstrap class that'll just give a light gray background. And then I'm going to set this equal to user.isActive. Okay, so it's basically dynamically setting a class. It's going to give it this bg-light class if the user is active. So if I save this, we're not going to see any difference because we haven't made any of these users active yet. So let's go to our component TS file, and let's take John Doe here, the handsome fella, who I don't think is 30 years old, but you can't really control your generated images. But anyway, let's take him and let's make him active. So we'll say isActive, and we'll set that to true, and then we'll go down here. Actually, I'm going to just close this up, and then we'll go down here and let's make Kevin not active. So we'll say isActive false, and then we'll go down here and we'll say isActive true for Karen. Alright, so if we save this, what's going to happen is the class of bg-light is being applied to John Doe and Karen Williams because they have the property isActive equal to true, and that's the condition for this class binding. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense, and that's very powerful because it really allows us to connect the style of our UI to the values and the functionality or the state of the application or of the component. All right, you know what? I'm going to change this guy's age from 30 to, let's say, 70, because that's kind of bothering me. All right, now the next thing I want to do is ngClass, which allows us to bind one or more CSS classes to an element. So I'm going to use this button, this add new user button. I'm going to get rid of the button light class because what I want to do is bind the button success class to this if a certain property is enabled. So let's go ahead and add some brackets here in the button and say ngClass, and set it to a property we're going to create called current classes. All right, so we'll go to our component, and up at the top let's add current classes, and initially we'll just set it to just an empty object. Okay, and then we need a function to set the current class, so we'll say set current classes, and we're going to take that current classes object and we're going to just add to it. So we're going to say a class of btn success if this dot enable add is true. Okay, so this class will be applied to this button if this property is true. So let's go ahead and save this. Actually, we need to call this function. It's not being called, so we can do that. We could do it in the constructor, but I'm going to do it in the ng on init. So we'll say this dot set current classes, and save. Now it's not applied. The green, the button class isn't applied because enable add is set to false. So if I set this to true and save, now you'll see it's green. Okay, now it has the button class. So we can add more to this if we want. Let's say we want to have a class called big text, where I'll just uppercase the text, and we'll connect that to the show extended property. Now this isn't really something I would do in building an application like this, but I don't have too many options to give you guys for examples with this mini component that we're building. So just know that, you know, I mean, I just want you to understand how this works rather than how exactly it benefits this component. All right, hopefully that makes sense. But let's save this and let's go to our component CSS file, and we'll create a class called big-text. And you can experiment, and you can put ngClass on other parts if you have other ideas, maybe do something with the nav bar or whatever. But we're going to set the text transform to uppercase and save. Okay, so now you can see the button now has uppercase text, and the reason it does is because we set it to that class to show extended, and show extended is set to true. If I were to set that to false and save, now you'll see we don't have the big text. Okay, it also doesn't show the extended information here for the users. So I'm going to put that back to true. Alright, so that's pretty much the best example I could come up with for ngClass within this component. In the next video, we're going to look at ngStyle, which works very similar to ngClass.